Okay, July 30th. We made it to the end of the month. All right, I'm just going to jump into things and see if we can kick some stuff out of the way. Sick leave bank replaced by sick leave sharing. I think we're okay with that. I think we can work out wording, and I'll make sure once we get it all finalized that we get the wording to you. I think the stuff that you've got is pretty good, and you guys had offered a suggestion on maybe some addition. I'll just run it by you guys. So I think that one's pretty easy to, unless you guys change your mind.
No,
Okay.
we just were wondering, we had initially talked in one of the issues that was brought up about the sick leave and why it was kind of a pain last year was because we were trying to figure out what to do with those that were already there.
Right.
And I didn't know if some thought had been.
My thought would be that we just put it into the sick leave sharing, for lack of a better phrase, bank, that it just goes there. And that would be what we would use to go down to the point where once that was gone, then people would have to donate.
Okay, do we know how many days that is?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't. I would be afraid to even venture a guess, to be honest with you.
Okay. I personally don't see a problem, but I'll check with these guys when we eventually probably need to go caucus. So we'll
Okay.
hold off on that one.
The disciplinary procedures, I think we talked last time. Really, this is one of those things we want to table until maybe next year and determine if we can resolve this without any changes. I think other than that, we're not willing to do anything different on that at this time.
Our issue with tabling disciplinary procedures is you mentioned having that done administratively, but currently that is what is happening, is it's being done administratively. You have, and I am speaking just from
Sure.
generalities here, because I honestly don't know any specific instance or anything like that. But my understanding is that you have been more than willing to let teachers have representation within meetings, and that hasn't been a problem. However, that may not always be the case. You know, you might be gone, there might be something different.
It's in the negotiated agreement that a teacher can request for there to be.
But a disciplinary procedure, a discipline outside of evaluation is not in our.
Anything that's, any discussion with an administrator can be asked to be put off for at least 5 days and rescheduled when they can have a member of the association there.
So that's what you're broadly speaking of for that.
Right.
Okay, I will have to go back and look at the contract in that section because I do know what part you're talking about. Okay, I will go back and look.
Well, that would be my interpretation of it. At any point, a teacher can say, look, I want representation, and that should end that discussion. And if for some reason it doesn't, I would say the teacher just needs to contact me.
My issue also is that if we put it further into the contract, that helps ensure uniformity and consistency. You know, somebody comes to a building administrator, somebody comes to a district administrator with an issue, there are specific steps that you go through. I would hate to think that, you know, one teacher got treated one way and one teacher got treated another way, but unfortunately we are all human, and, you know, we have different building administrators and they all do things a little bit differently. I mean, they all have different personalities. That's just kind of how things go. Where if it's in the contract, it says, okay, if one thing happens, this is what you do. If another thing happens, this is what you do. And teachers are assured that that's the steps that's going to be taken.
Just for clarification, when you said somebody goes to an administrator, you meaning if someone, not the teacher themselves, goes to an administrator with a concern?
Correct, with a concern, yes. I mean, it can be anybody, you know, a parent, another teacher, anything. And so that consistency is really kind of what we're looking for.
Is there board policy though that outlines how those concerns should be addressed currently?
There should be, yeah.
Unfortunately, we can't grieve board policy.
But so I would say, isn't there procedures? Now, I haven't looked through your negotiated agreement or your handbooks. Is there not procedures in the handbook or the negotiated agreement that talk about complaints?
No,
So then the board policy would be
It's-
what you would go to with complaints.
but we can't even in our negotiated agreement reference, it's not even referenced board policy. There's not even anything that says per board policy. There's nothing.
Board policy supersedes everything though. So if you were a teacher and you felt like the situation wasn't handled correctly, wouldn't you reference board policy and say this is what board,
But a teacher can't grieve that.
correct, but you have, the administrators are bound by the board policy.
Right. And if they don't follow the board policy, then that becomes an administrative action that we would take.
Correct. However, the world we live in currently is not always the nicest to teachers. It's kind of a scary place sometimes. And board policies, while right now it's what it says, doesn't always mean that that's the way the board policies are always going to read in the future. Because we have no input in that. The board policy is based strictly on what that board at that time says. So if they want to go and change it, they don't need teacher input. They don't need a ratification by the teachers.
I'm pulling something up quick just to take a look.
Yeah, sometimes.
And I mean, and we understand having.
Has there
like,
been a specific, I mean,
I can't speak to specifics because again, that's a personnel matter and I don't know a personnel matter, but I do know that there have been teachers that have had issues. And I'm just thinking of 5 books off the top of my head right now in my library that I'm sure that some parents would have issues with. If they don't like the answer that their kid gives them, like if a student comes to me and asks me about a book and we have a discussion, if that parent doesn't like that answer, or that kid goes home and says, you should see this, look, that Ms. Crummins has in our library. I mean, they could, other than just getting it, try to get it banned from the library, they could personally come after me and try to get my job. And that's scary to me for a book. And I'm not even a social studies teacher or an English teacher talking about various topics.
well, and I don't want you to think that I'm minimizing it by any means, but whether there is different policies or not, a person could do the same thing, whether there's a policy. I know your hope is that something to give you an extra protection
Correct.
from that happening, but I think
But
I think that between the board policies and what is there, again, it would have to be something that would demonstrate that the teacher had done something inappropriate. And we're going to use the library thing because
Yeah.
it's the book thing is
Right,
always
and
an
I'm
easy
here.
one, right? In that case, I will tell you that in my mind, I don't see that being anything that would go anywhere, because you're not the only person that identifies the books that are in the library, or if the content is inappropriate or whatever the case may be. I think you could always have people that are going to complain, but I think that we feel as though that there are procedures and policies in place that help with that. And if we haven't had issues that have happened, I don't know that we need to make a policy for something that's not an issue that we don't already feel like we can address.
while my understanding of issues that have come up this last year have been dealt with fairly and equitably based on current board policy. I will go back to my statement again.
Sure.
That is based on current board policy.
in our administration, and current administration.
Correct.
Sure,
Which
sure.
that could change.
Sure.
Like, you're understanding the first situation, you understand that, Marty, that who's to say somebody else might not understand it the way in which you do.
Right,
What protects that staff member?
sure.
By having it only board policy, that leaves teachers open to a board that might not like that policy and want to change it.
So clarifying again on your handbooks and negotiated agreement, is there anything that we already have besides board policy that discusses complaints?
The only thing we have in the negotiated agreement is representation.
What about your building handbooks? Or the, the teacher,
Yeah, we'll have to take a look.
I mean, because to me, there's always a progressive form of discipline from a simple conversation.
Well, it's tricky. I'm trying to understand it too, because because I'm looking at the complaint board policy.
15 and 16.
Yeah, it's big, but I'm like, to apply it in the individual case, which I totally get and respect. I think the point of the way this is done, I thought, was to account for exactly the situation you're talking about. Because it was, like Jamie said, I mean, the board policy is the district law. I mean, you are covered under that. Is the way I understand this to be.
Yeah.
The serving point of this. I'm saying that right, but
No.
I mean, it talks about instructional materials, facilities and services, personnel, and then it's got a structure for how those things are to be handled. There's procedures in here,
Right.
which I think is what we're trying to avoid putting in the negotiated agreement, is
Okay.
something too detailed
We,
in that agreement. But at the same time, I totally get where you're coming from. If you got somebody coming after you, you don't feel like you're covered because your contract doesn't say you're covered, but I feel like you
but
are.
does the board policy cover progressive discipline?
This, I don't know, at the top of my head, I'm not sure how that's worded. I mean, most of these are buck stops with superintendent type policies, the way they're written.
So let me ask, because again,
Or
No.
building
I don't know.
administrator. So
does each building have their own handbook,
Yes.
student, staff handbook?
Well, the student's handbook is going to be the same, like all elementary students are going to have.
But you
Essentially
would
the
have
same
a
handbook.
staff handbook for each building.
Yes.
So is there some thought that we could put a universal item in the staff handbook for all buildings that would talk about a progressive chain of action, which would allow your building principals to be involved in this conversation as well? I mean, I think that Marty's saying he doesn't know what really specifics you need, and you said there's nothing that you can recall has happened in the last at least year. But if you start with the conversation with your building principals from your perspective and get them together and say, hey, wouldn't that be something that would be optional for you? I mean, to me, that allows your principals to be engaged in it and to understand what your concerns are versus just talking to, Marty,
Right.
myself and two.
I mean, we can definitely talk about that here in a little bit.
is what we
We will
have
put it on the
not
list.
being followed, or is it not specific enough?
I
Or-
think our issue is that while what we have is being followed and while what we have has, my understanding anyway, been addressed appropriately and fairly, our concern is that this might not always be the case. And while people always say, well, why are you trying to solve a problem before it happens? Why don't you wait and see what happens? In this case, we feel like if there comes to be a problem, that problem is going to be big enough that you kind of wish you would have solved it before you needed to.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want to put the chicken too far before
No,
the
I
egg,
get it.
but
I get where you're going with that. I do. I don't know how to do that.
okay, well, we can talk about the handbook when we caucus eventually, so we'll
Okay.
put that on the list.
Yep.
Okay,
And it may be one of those things that maybe what we need to do is to put it in a position where we study it and figure out a way to do that going forward.
Mhm.
I don't know that we'll solve it for this negotiation, but maybe it's something we need to look at more
Okay.
extensively.
Before we go on with
Yep.
the rest, we did have something come up after all the schedules for this next week were sent out, that Jill would like to address.
Okay.
So we had talked about just going forward, and you said it
Sure.
would be dealt with administratively with all the online training that we're having to do, that
Uh-huh.
KCB, and that it would be understood by administration that there would not be conflict between schedules. Specifically, special ed already, we have training at the middle school from 9 to 11. From 9 to 11:30, we're scheduled for our annual KCB trainings, where all staff will get to do that. But then.
Which training is that again?
KCB.
KSAP.
But then Mike and I are also scheduled on that same time, that same day, to be down here with Mrs. Raines.
Okay. And what's
So that's
the,
a perfect example of what we've been
Sure.
experiencing the last couple of years, where we're double booked, and when other staff are getting opportunities to
and what do
do their
you,
training,
what are you scheduled for here?
I'm scheduled here 9:15 to 11:30.
And what is that meeting?
It's just
It
that-
just
Annual
says
sped
secondary certified sped staff at SEC
Okay. And which day is it?
of the 9th.
9th. Okay. If you'll give me an opportunity, I think we'll fix it. I just got to know.
But there's where I know that you were gonna, and I know we just talked about it, but those are the things that are consistently happening with
Right.
online training, where we are double booked.
Well,
And then it falls on us to have to come up with that time to complete it. And I think I gave you the hours in one of our meetings, how many hours
Sure.
we're doing outside of our duty day to do those online trainings that we're required to do.
absolutely. Because we haven't concluded negotiations, we have not informed administrators of all the things that we have discussed at this point. Because again, we want to do that in one shot and give them, here's all the things that are going to happen or need to happen or shouldn't happen or whatever the case may be. So I'll take some responsibility on that because I have not communicated that as well. And again,
The expectation has always been that those are supposed to be during the duty day.
absolutely. But by you letting me know, we can resolve that. That's what we need you to do. It's okay. It's okay to get hold of us and say, hey, this is what's we talked about and this is what's happening. That's okay. That's what we want to have happen. Okay.
I had a question.
Yep.
About the sped proposal. We just wanted to clarify when we were talking about the low incidence behavior, the interrelated, and then the, thank you, related services. The gifted teachers would fall into interrelated.
Yes.
He's on our side. Come on, Marty.
That's the right answer.
Yeah.
Seriously, we practice.
I may be a little over my skis on this one. I think if you guys remember, I was like, okay, well, I don't know who all this is. I know who all gets it. I don't.
We just wanted to make sure that they were like put in with those interrelated.
And there's only 3.
Right.
Um,
My thought would be that, yes, what we're talking about is anyone that would be in a teaching role.
Okay.
If that
Yeah.
helps,
Yeah,
that may be
they are.
the better way for me to say it without falling down the mountain and crashing and James just standing there shaking his head the whole time while I hit the ground. Okay.
Can we skip around?
Sure.
We got an email from Candace yesterday about ESSER funds. And we noticed that there was not a spot on there for teacher retention incentive. As a selected
Oh, as a
item.
choice of how
Yes.
you.
I think,
And
But
we
that-
did not know if you guys had had a conversation about ESSER funds and our proposal.
That's the stakeholder input survey. deal.
Yeah.
Correct. So that ESSER, basically what we've done is put together a stakeholder ESSER survey, which is what was sent out. Those 22 items that you get to rank 1 to 4 are really pretty much directly tied to the 15 criteria that were mentioned at the very beginning with when ESSER 1 came out. Here's the 15 areas that we would be approved for the use of those funds. I think there was, at least on the one question, the professional development talked about stipends for professional development. I felt like that probably covers a little bit of that. Was there something that was specifically mentioning retention stipends? No, but I don't think, and I could be wrong, but I don't think those 15 original ESSER criteria mention bonuses or retention
I
stipends
don't
at the
think
beginning.
specifically, no.
Except we're talking about ESSER 3 and not ESSER
And-
1.
I attended a meeting on ESSER 3, and I believe that when they talked about the allowable expenses, they said that's the same as ESSER 1 and 2.
So the
But there has been some conversation on the backside with, within these meetings about, can we use it for bonuses? The answer is no. Can we use it for COVID pay for work that was done last year? The answer is no. It's, can we associate any type of funds going forward to work to be performed? So I believe Auburn Washburn's whole setup, which was ESSER 2.
Right.
ESSER 2 funds, teachers had to sign saying they would do 20 hours of
I
extra
think
work.
something like that.
So
Yeah.
the teachers had to sign a contract saying from this time to this time, they would put in, and again, I think it was 20
Right.
hours of extra work,
Right.
and then they would receive a stipend. Is that what
Right.
they
It
call
was essentially their document was the same as what we did last year.
I don't disagree.
Verification on that.
I don't disagree. However, I've got quite the list of districts who have already negotiated an ESSER 3, or in this Auburn Washburn's case, an ESSER 2 incentive retention for their teachers.
And then I've seen a list come through on the listserv for board clerks, and you're right, there's about 50% and 50% so far that I've seen that have done something. Again, you can't call it a bonus. They've called it a retention stipend. They called it an extra duty stipend. But yeah, I mean, so there's conversations going on. I feel like with the ESSER 3 money, it requires us, to get stakeholder input. I can tell you there's over 300 surveys that have been completed to this point. I did a quick review of it. You do have, again, that opportunity when you're rating on the professional development one, which again, I think is a pretty good tie into stipends. It says stipends for professional development. But then you have the last question that you can answer, and that is where a lot of people have put in, specifically mentioned bonuses, retention money, stipends. So I think that survey is going to give us the feedback that we want, and particularly in context to what you're saying. But we have to go through that process of gathering the stakeholder input. Then we have to go back and put together a proposal for how to expend that money. So X amount of dollars could be set aside for professional development, retention bonuses. But I don't think that I'm in a position, nor Marty at this point, to be able to allocate those funds. And then on August 20th is when the due date is, we have to submit the application.
So you're asking
But
for
I-
input.
But I don't
The
know.
district is asking for input, but the input closes on August 9th. So 11 days later, you're going to have the proposal done.
Well, we
That's
ha-
quite the turnaround.
Well, you're right. Yeah, well.
We have
so-
to. I mean, that's just the
But I'm
time
just
frame.
saying that I would,
It's a little surprising that you're gonna be able to do that.
Yes.
It's like a turnaround.
Well,
that's quite the turnaround. If you're asking for teacher, community, all these inputs. And then to be able to go through and look at that and go, okay, well, this is what the community wants, teachers as a whole, and so this is going to be our proposal. To me, I feel like that's cutting it close, and honestly, it kind of seems like that there's already an idea of what you want to do with it, and
we haven't had any real meetings on what to do with the ESSER III funds. I know
Right.
I've met with teaching and learning, and we've discussed some of the needs for the district. And I just said, let's start just throwing things up, into a list to see what the expenditures would be. But it's not really gone. I mean, it's a quick process with what the state is asking us to do. Was it last week that I attended the webinar?
Yep.
And then it was the other day that I started doing research on surveys, and we pulled a survey, and that's where we ended up with our stakeholder survey. I took the questions from the application. The application just opened up this week.
This week.
I mean, it's been pretty quick. And when on that webinar, when they said August 20th was the due date, you're right. That's cutting it pretty close. But that doesn't mean that when we get set down and we look at the survey results, that everybody at that table looking at those survey results can't say, let's allocate $360,000 to teachers. I mean, it's not up to myself to say allocate 360,000, because I believe that's what it would be, about
The
360.
amount that we
Yeah.
asked would be with 2.3 million.
proposal,
Right.
because
Well, so I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, it's pretty clear cut. You guys want to get paid a $1,200 retention stipend.
right, and I will tell you that if you want us teachers to sign something, every elementary, well, I don't know every, but elementary teacher contract day starts at 8:30. Students come off the bus at 8:30. So now teachers need to, in the past, and this started last year, instead of only having a few teachers, every elementary teacher is going to be on duty with kids starting at 8:30. Where in the past, we have had you come at 8:30, they eat breakfast, they do something else, or they don't eat breakfast at all because we didn't serve breakfast. And you don't get kids for at least 15 minutes. And then you have that 15 minutes. So now you have an extra 15 minutes plus with kids every single day. I
So,
think that's gonna take care of the 20 hours.
so their duty day starts at 8:30
Yes,
and they're getting kids at 8:30?
yes,
Technically, you have to be there before.
right.
Secondary as well.
So I guess my experience is that, what's your duty day at the elementary?
Our duty is 8:30 to 4:15.
And so what is your current school day?
8:30, well, 8:50 to 4.
And this is going to be one of those questions that may be painfully obvious, but I'm just not aware of. Is it because the buses are there earlier than they used to be, or is there?
We serve breakfast. So
Right.
the buses have to be there at 8:30 in order to feed kids, which is totally understandable. You want kids, and kids focus a lot better when they've got food in their stomach.
Sure.
And you want kids to have that. But someone has to be there, and not every kid on the bus eats, which means not every kid on the bus is in the cafeteria. And if they're not in that cafeteria, they're in your classroom.
So we don't put them in the gym?
We couldn't because of COVID.
Yeah, last year we couldn't
Right.
because of COVID. And
So-
even if you do put them in the gym, somebody has to monitor
Past
the gym.
practice to put them in the gym? Is that how it was in the past before COVID?
The secondary level, they were in the commons area.
But in the elementary,
Yes.
before we had the
Yes.
change, we put them in the gym.
Yes. And even then, you still had staff in there.
Well, and I think it's reasonable that you would assign staff throughout the year to do breakfast duty and gym duty. I mean, heck, I did breakfast duty and gym duty, and as a building principal,
And
I assigned breakfast
Well,
and gym duty.
And it depended on the building. Some, like in my building, paras came in early and had an extra pay. And teachers did not do breakfast duty because that's a whole different thing with teachers and food. But so paras got paid. There were a couple of paras that would come in early and they would monitor kids for breakfast. But teachers would always be the ones monitoring the gym.
Okay, I'm going to kind of direct us back to the question being ESSER funds. I don't think at this point we can say one way or another. We don't know because we don't have all the results back. And one of the criteria, from what I understand, is that we have to have input from stakeholders. And I think we've gotten some of the results that we've gotten back. There are people that have put that on there, the idea on the stipend or whatever you want to call it, but on there. But I don't know how that's going to turn out. I don't have any idea. And the board hasn't seen any of that and hasn't had any opportunity. So I don't, if ESSER 2 is different, but we have spent all of the ESSER 2 money. It's gone. So the only thing that we would have available would be ESSER 3. And at this point, I can't tell you one way or the other what will happen. And that's not meant to be, opaque or anything like that, or try and make it to where it can't be seen. I just don't know. And the board hasn't even had an opportunity to review any of the information.
I understand the information is new that you guys have received, but you also got our notice letter that had ESSER on there in March. So this isn't something that we just brought up at like our second meeting. I mean, you guys were aware of this.
I understand, Jill, but I can't change that. The ESSER 2 money is gone. There's no money to pay. We bought curriculum and the things that we talked about before. So I understand that it was on there. Okay. But that doesn't change where we're at right now. So we can continue to talk about this where I can't do anything about it and we can't answer it. And we can beat the horse to death, or we can say, let's go on to another topic and then we'll figure that out as we go along. Or we can just end now.
Well, we can't hear them now. Because I already said we're going to talk.
Okay. Do you want to go through items or?
Yep, nope, go ahead.
Okay. I think we had already talked about the duty days issue. I don't think we're going to plan on doing anything different there. Discretionary leave, unless I am mistaken, I don't think you guys want to drop the sick leave buyback. So we would say that we are not interested in changing the discretionary leave at this time.
That is highly disappointing on a number of reasons. We have heard multiple times, this year, in fact, and last year, that the board is wanting to do discretionary. We were told specifically this year that teachers should not feel guilty about using their leave and spending their leave that they have earned. But getting rid of buyback is a no-go.
Okay.
But
And
that
right.
was never our proposal, to make everything discretionary. The way that our proposal has been distorted makes it completely unattractive for anybody who I talk to. Everybody who I talk to, I would get emails. Don't do it. Don't get rid of buyback. Getting rid of buyback is a non-starter. And we will continue to bring up discretionary. You can
And
expect it to see
that's
on
okay.
next year's thing.
That's okay. We're not going to do anything with it this year. Well, we're okay with that. And I'm okay with you bringing it up every year. I don't have any issue with that. That's okay.
Fabulous.
Okay. You want me to move on or?
Yes.
Liquidated damages. We had talked about that, but I don't know if we'd ever come to any conclusion on how you guys felt.
I don't think we need to liquidate damages this time.
Can you say that again? I
I don't
didn't.
think we need to do liquidated damages at this time.
Okay. We're willing to forego that. We can talk about it next year. We've already taken care of the payroll deductions, extended contracts. I think we had come to an agreement on all of the supplementals. And I think at this point, we would be willing with the 7% for the sped, as we had talked about earlier,
Mhm.
to include teachers. And then the last thing was that the salary proposal was 1,500 on the base. Steps in B and A 12 would increase to $300. Increase health insurance contribution $15 more per month to $430 in exchange for an additional 2 contract days going from 184 to 186. And I will tell you that that puts us in a position where we're going to have to figure out a way to come up with about $300,000 to do all that beyond what we had anticipated. So when I tell you that 1,500 is the absolute most we can go, that is the absolute most we can go.
Okay, well, we need to caucus.
Okay.
Okay. What were the numbers on that? On that?
15 and 16.
Thank you. Couple of things.
Okay.
So we looked at sections 15 and 16 in the contract. And while we do have the representation in there, we are missing a couple of steps that we do feel like are vital. A big one is the progressive discipline. It just says that the teacher will get a copy. It doesn't give like what happens after that. There is no grievance procedure, which is the other big one. And then while due process is in the contract, due process isn't in the contract specifically for a grievance procedure and for a discipline like such as this. Now we do understand that wanting to have admin input is important, and we agree. I mean, if admin is the one that is going to be following these rules also, because I mean, something might be between the teachers, but if it's in the contract, admin has to follow it. And admin is going to be the one, especially building admin, dealing with something for the first time. We do not have any objection to getting building admin input into any disciplinary procedure like that. However, we would like it included in the contract where 16 is also. So it would be a modification to 16. We'd be willing to look at a committee and do a building and teacher, building principal, and an admin principal, like a SEC admin, along with teacher input. But the contract is the only thing that we can grieve. If a teacher doesn't agree, a teacher can't agree with can't grieve board policy. A teacher can't grieve building, like a building handbook. Teachers don't have input in board policy. Teachers don't have input in building handbooks. The contract's the only thing we can grieve, and which is why we would like it in the contract. So while we have a good framework and a good start framework in our current contract, we would like that expanded.
The only question I would have is what you're saying is I would want to get KSB input on the ability for a teacher when the handbook policy is not followed, what your recourse really would be. I think that if something is in the handbook and it's not followed by administrator, I think that you can file a complaint or, a grievance. But again, I need to check with KSB on that. And I do think that what you're talking about is great. And if we can agree on principle, then I would be happy to help do that this year with you. And once we get it done, add it to whatever document, whatever area, whether it's the contract handbook, this year, as soon as we get it done. So if we can agree on this in principle and get it started, then we can add the language when it's completed this year, not next year, but this year. But again, I want to get input from KSB on what you can actually grieve with regard to handbook and board policy contract.
Okay. Yeah.
So is that something?
Yeah,
we're
that is
agreeable?
definitely something we definitely be willing to do.
Are we all on board over here?
I know you guys are frustrated. I know you probably feel like we're beating a dead horse. But I would like, before we go on with the next item on the list, we do have a question or a proposal for ESSER that is not money. We agree that, and we like that we're getting different stakeholder inputs. And I mean, other than the fact that you have to and you're required to by ESSER 3, just getting other people's opinions is important to processes.
Sure.
That way, and you're not just blindly flailing about. We were wondering, and our proposal is that once those survey results are collected, that someone on the negotiating team be there to kind of be included in the review process. And that if the feedback warrants it, that talks open back up again about a teacher retention incentive.
So I want to say that I hear what you guys keep saying about the retention, but I feel like it's going to be better for the staff to tie it to something other than retention. So,
I'm using the language that's required for,
so for example, I keep going back to professional development. If we have things that teachers need to complete that
Right.
often would be done within the day, a different time period, maybe on your own, we can
But not-
tie that extra funds to completing
but
that.
not everything. So the way I look at this, the way I look at the ESSER was to help mitigate circumstances around COVID. Not everything around COVID is a professional development. I mean, I have an extra time in between classes so that I can clean. And cleaning is not part of my normal duty, but cleaning is part of COVID. It's not professional development, but it's something that's been added to my plate because of COVID. So I have to clean materials, I have to clean tables. You know, that's not something I would normally have to do. Not professional development, but is it added job to my job? Yes, it's added to my job. So that's why I am saying incentive or retention incentive, because to me, tying to professional development means that, oh, you're strictly learning something, you're strictly doing something like that. And that's not where our COVID, that's not in our mind, all COVID is about, or all that money is about. It's about the added duties that we are going to have and the added work that we are going to have, because we are still very much in this pandemic.
So here's what I would propose is that once we get all the data put together and we start collecting the possible uses for the COVID, including who did you
Just
say?
anybody on the team.
Including a elementary rep, secondary rep from your team,
Sure.
and then going over and maybe even meeting with the directors. But 2 points. One, when Marty talks about the amount of money, it's about $300,000 that we have to identify and take out of operations or salaries, which is kind of, tying that.
I'm not talking salaries, like I'm strictly talking assets.
Right.
All we were asking
The
is,
funds that we have to take from operations, can we backfill that with ESSER funds? That's kind of why I was getting on that.
Okay.
Okay, and number two, I think that as long as you understand that it would be a beginning point for a conversation, but there not necessarily would be any promise made by this committee that it's going to result in funds.
and I'm not asking for that. I'm strictly asking for someone from the negotiating team. Your suggestion was an elementary person, a secondary person. Be in that review process to see what all that feedback is.
Yep.
And that's what we're
Perfect.
asking.
And I think that's great.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yes.
I know, like Liz said, beating a dead horse, but I want you guys to understand why this money is so important to us. COVID is not going away. What we did last year, we're going to be doing again this year. We know that. And I understand you guys had to make tough decisions, but we were in the trenches with the kids, dealing with mass behaviors, mitigating learner loss, the social, emotional that this took on your staff. We took home to our own kids. And then we had to deal with our own kids and our own families that were struggling. This was not easy on us, and we know it's not going away. I am personally terrified to go through another year like this. It scares me. Our contact time with our students, we're increasing that. The way in which we grade, the way in which we contact our parents, schedule after schedule after schedule that we created. So when you talk about, well, Washington Rule did 20 hours, what are we going to do? What professional development? We're doing it. We're doing it every day. We're doing it every day with our students. We put our lives at risk, quite frankly, our kids' lives at risk, but we went in and we did it, and we're gonna do it again this year. And we're still gonna go home and have to deal with our own kids and our own families and our husbands and our moms and our dads. So for me, it's you guys acknowledging what we have done and are going to do. It has not been easy on all of us. And I know it's not been easy on you guys as well. But please just recognize to the staff what we've done. We deserve that. And what we're going to be doing is not going away. We know that. We know all the changes that have been happening in the last 2 weeks in Kansas. What Governor Kelly has said. So please, like, just give us something. I mean, it's really heart-wrenching. I mean, and I want our kids in school. You guys know my daughter spoke at the board. But it is taking a social, emotional toll on our families. It is. We need something to kind of lift us up. I think we've done enough. I just want it to be recognized. And I think we all deserve that. I do. So am I beating a dead horse to you guys? And I know you're frustrated, but we're frustrated as well. And it's quite frankly hurtful.
Jill, I appreciate your sincerity and your comments and expressing how you feel. I don't think we're frustrated with Esther. We're just at the very beginning of the process. And I think that's why we're coming across the way we are. I have no preconceived idea to how the money's spent. I feel like, with ESSER 2, we were maybe a little behind the 8 ball and we rushed it through. And ESSER 3, my goal has always been to follow what we need to be doing. So please
All
don't.
these other schools have followed it and have given to their teachers. Have they not?
And we did last year.
And
it doesn't mean that we won't this year. We're getting input from the stakeholders, and I think the board does appreciate it. And I don't think anybody has said that it's a no. We don't really know yet. We're going through the process exactly the way that we're supposed to by getting the input from the stakeholders, and I think that's a good idea. I like the idea of being able to sit down when we get the results and have you guys be able to see what we see. But I can't tell you right now what that's going to be because I just don't know. And that doesn't mean that the board or that each one of us don't feel for you and have a tremendous appreciation for everything. That was part of, it's a challenge to make it happen last year. And we were able to use some of those funds, keeping in mind that we wanted to also do that for our non-licensed staff because they are important too. I know you guys know that they're important and you want them, but we can't spend that money on them. We can't do that because if it's a wage and hour issue. We can't say that they worked extra hours and we're going to pay them with this because then it's a problem because we should have paid them the first time with overtime type stuff. So that money has to come from somewhere else. And we were able to make that work last year. The board was committed to that. Tremendous credit, especially to these folks to my right with what they did. And they did that because they do appreciate what you're doing. And I understand your frustration too. I really do. We're just at a point where we don't know because we don't have results back. And I will tell you that for a lot of districts, they had a business director from April through the end of June, and we didn't. Unfortunately, we had baling wire, Band-Aid, and me. So that was not ideal. And I will tell you, I am not an ESSER expert. I don't claim to be, and I'll be honest with you, I don't want to be. I don't. I only have so much limited capacity in my brain, and I don't know if there's that much room for that. But what I can tell you is that I understand your frustration, but I can't tell you, yes, we can do this or no, we can't, because I don't know. I think that the board, with the offer that we've made in regards to salary, that is an attempt to tell all teachers, hey, we appreciate what you do. We're going to have to come up with over $300,000 in operations, and the commitment to do that is because there is an appreciation for everything that you do and all the things that you always do under the best circumstances. And last year was tough, and we certainly hope that something happens to where things start to trend back in a positive way right now. But it's an unknown, and those are tough as well. So I completely understand, and I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate what you did last year, and what you'll do this year. I can't tell you. I don't know. And we'll know more once we get results back.
Okay. It's been a lot of talk about committees this year. I feel like there's been a lot of talk about committees this year. And so I just wanted to go over those.
Sure.
So that we are all on the same page as far as things that need to get looked at during the school year, so that we can be ready to go when we come negotiations next year.
Absolutely.
We talked about extra duty.
Yep.
And having an extra duty committee looking at supplementals.
Yep. I think we do both,
do
extra
both
duty and
together?
supplementals
Okay.
all together.
We talked about the ESSER and doing that. We also talked about the disciplinary, and it seems like that might get taken care of, hopefully relatively quickly. I say relatively because I don't mean like in the next week, but I mean,
I would like to start it here the first 9 weeks and have some
Yeah.
resolution by the semester.
okay, that sounds good.
And ESSER will be in the next couple
Couple
weeks. So-
weeks,
So
correct.
we will try to get those two taken care of. The supplemental extra duty one will be a conversation with our activities directors, with Marty and myself, and then we will try to create a little time frame, and then we need to have committee members from both activities, athletics,
Correct.
all that.
Yes. Okay, and then the last one we had talked about briefly at the very beginning, but I wanted to bring it up, was that, as you guys know, one of our big things that we talk about every year, and at least the last few years, has been our salary schedule and those people at the top. And we have talked about looking at just salary schedule as a whole, and it's kind of been we'll look at a committee, we'll look at committee. I would kind of like to actually do that this year.
Absolutely. I agree.
Okay.
I think it would make it better for both sides.
Yes.
I think being able to see it, they're complicated. And it's not as easy to just fix things with a magic wand.
No, because
And things that have happened over the course of years, sometimes just great ideas sometimes become outdated. And something that was phenomenal in a moment isn't as effective later on. I'm trying to think. I think my wife says that about me a lot. I'm not nearly as effective as I once was.
So just so you have, I want you to make sure that so we're all on the same page. The discipline committee will be led by me to get that done. Same with ESSER. Marty and I both will do that, put together the extra duty supplemental committee. And then Marty's in charge of the salary schedule.
Sure.
So now you know who to contact if you have questions, or it's not something that's being moved on directly.
And Liz, I would ask for you and Mary to holler and give me some names for a committee for the salary schedule.
Okay.
And I know the next couple of weeks are miserable.
They'll be busy.
So, but it gives us time.
Mhm.
And, it's everything from, I think we want to look at percentages between steps.
Mhm.
Is there a way to fix it without doing that? I don't know. I think there's a myriad of things that we can do. So if you guys come up with a few names, don't hesitate to let me know.
Okay. We can do that. Have we hit everything else? So with that all getting ironed out, we would like to accept the board's proposal on the salary with the 1,500 on the base, the steps in VA 12 and VA, the increased health insurance contribution, along with the additional 2 contracting.
Okay.
And step and lateral, yes.
Right. Yes, yes. Yep, I got it figured in there, so it's there. I don't know why in the world I have a hard time throwing that in there when I say that, but it is. Okay. So it looks like we have everything kind of,
Oh, sick leave. We were okay with using the bank of what we have right now. Yes.
to just,
Yeah, we were just interested in finding out exactly how many days that was
Yeah.
in there.
we'll try and figure out. I know the gals can figure that out. I'm probably not smart enough, but because I will tell you, I don't know that we could ever at this point track back who all's, what days are left and where they would go back to that person or anything like that. I just don't know how in the world we would ever do that.
Yeah, we're okay with that being.
So, and what would, and my thought would be, we just use that first.
Correct.
And once it's exhausted, then it would be an appeal. And I will probably communicate with either you or Mary if something comes up where there's a request and all of those things, just so you guys know, yeah, we had, and I have no idea how many days there are, but let's say there's 100 days and this was the request and it went through the process and it's 10 days that were rewarded or whatever,
Okay.
just to kind of let you guys know.
As Marty concludes here, I do want to say, I appreciate the opportunity to work with you guys on the committees, and I think that's the best way to move forward. And then I would just highly invite you guys throughout the year to meet with Marty and I.
Absolutely.
So we can always put little pieces together before we get to the point, and maybe we can make this process a little more seamless. So.
No, I hope you guys know you can always reach out to me, email, call, stop by, whatever. I'm always more than happy to visit with you. Do you feel like we have kind of a tentative overall agreement, or am I overstating it?
We agreed. I'm just gonna go through really quick.
Sure.
We agreed on sick leave. We are gonna look at disciplinary.
Mhm.
We did not agree on this discretionary. So that's tabled. We are gonna try to handle trainings within buildings and with admin. Liquidated damages is tabled. We did a TA already on payroll deductions, and we did a TA already on extending the contract for the counselors. We also did head girls wrestling, assistant girls wrestling, PDC chairs, cheerleading. We agreed to 7% for SPED. Then the salary proposal, and we are going to wait for the stakeholder survey for ESSER before anything with that is decided. And then we are doing a committee for extra duty. Have it all?
Supplemental pay and extra duty.
Supplemental pay and extra duty. Yeah,
And then the committee to look at the salary schedule.
correct.
Yep.
Okay, I believe we do have a TA.
Good. And as things come up, as you guys, I hope you guys know, always reach out and holler at me. And when there's Liz, anytime there's something, I hope you know to get hold of me. And I hope Mary will feel that way. She already told me something earlier, is that it was way too technical for me. I didn't have nearly enough knowledge to be able to answer, but I appreciate all that you guys do, and I know that the board appreciates all of this and the time and effort and that the challenges that come with it. I really do, and appreciate you guys, and we want to continue to build on this as we go forward each year. And just, it's about trust and communication and relationships. Okay.
A little bit of necessary paperwork. So voting.
Yes. Yes. What would be good would be if you could do that next week.
Well, we're going to be in buildings, I think, at some point, and so we can probably have our. Don't you think we can have that building, our building reps do it next week? Well, I mean, we need to present to teachers.
Right.
The proposal, and then we'll give some days for voting. So I don't
Ideally,
think we can have it done by Friday.
if you, if you could have the results or whatever it is, even Monday by noonish, that would work,
That way
because
we can take it to
as
the
long as
board.
we could take it to the board that evening, that would be ideal.
Yeah, August 9th is what we're talking about. So you have all next week.
Well, but we vote in person, and we're not getting to be in person until Thursday.
Could we window of time on Monday when the survey is either virtual or in person that morning to present? I know it's like late notice, but
Because you guys wouldn't have students until Wednesday, is that right?
Or Wednesday.
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 School, yeah.
Like, we had students Wednesday 11th, but if we had time Thursday morning, instead of waiting for each individual person or somebody to go around to each individual building, if someone could just get up in front of everybody, like classified staff could leave if they wanted to, and then just somebody get up in front of
Like at the end, of
everybody.
maybe at the end of convocation?
Yeah, and then just
Once it's
say,
done.
this is what you're going to be voting on.
we've done that in the past and it worked really well.
That makes
That way
sense.
everybody hears the same thing at one time.
Because you're not talking about 2 hours or anything like that. It's probably, I'm sure whoever gets to draw the short straw wants to make that as quick and
Well, then
painless as possible.
everybody's competition is.
You need the agenda?
Yeah, I'm just.
It's right here.
I know.
Well,
we
these are
would,
the
we
same
would
as
have,
far as it's in there.
we would have people actually will stay. Well, we could.
We do.
I wouldn't think we would even stay and vote then. I would think we would just vote in building, but that way everyone heard the same information.
Just vote in building. and vote.
Yeah, because that way our building reps have the teacher names and we can just check those off or have them initial or something as they vote. But it honestly should not take that long. It will just be a presentation of what was
Sure.
agreed upon. So that way everybody hears the same information.
I think we can probably work something out to where at the end of convocation, maybe. I'd give you my 15 minutes, but I'm afraid people might get mad. Not because I'm entertaining, but because I'm giving away the service awards and all that stuff. Might be somebody out there that, I want my gift. By gosh.
We will add it to the end.
Yep.
And- okay.
Yep.
Yep, we can do that.
But that would certainly be helpful for us to be able to take it to the board and discuss on our end, as opposed to having to set a special meeting and give notice and all of that. So, but if that's what we need to do, that's what we need to do.
We've done that.
We've done it pretty quick in the time.
Okay. Anything else? All right, you guys have a great weekend and do your best to enjoy the cool